Chief National Political Analyst. Every day, you can expect your daily dose of political news of consequence. If you're looking to be engaged, enlightened, and empowered to be a part of the solution to issues related to national politics, elections, identity, culture change, and social justice, A More Perfect Union was designed for you.
And we're back on Areva Martin in real time. Let's get you caught up. Israel has agreed to daily 4-hour pauses in operations inside Gaza to allow more civilians to leave the northern part of the enclave and facilitate an increase in humanitarian aid entering from Egypt, according to the White House today. The pauses are set to begin today. Senator Joe Manchin III of West Virginia announced today that he would not seek re-election in 2024, leaving the door open for Republicans to flip a seat in a solidly red state. 76-year-old Manchin said he would instead travel the country to gauge creating a movement to mobilize the middle and bring Americans together. Former President Donald Trump's top Republican rivals attacked him in the third GOP debate yesterday as a political loser, a changed man, and a distracted leader who failed to implement his top policy goals as president. Rep. Dean Phillips, Democrat of Minnesota, President Biden's newest and highest profile Democratic primary challenger, although I don't know that we can call Rep. Dean Phillips high profile in any way. Anyway, Dean Phillips is bringing on a new senior campaign team that includes former top strategists for the presidential bids of Senator Bernie Sanders and entrepreneur Andrew Yang. The Minnesota Supreme Court ruled yesterday that former President Donald Trump can appear on the primary ballot next year, but left open the possibility that he could be struck from the general election ballot because of the January 6th, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. It's a new day in Hollywood, 6 months after the first of 2 strikes brought the entertainment capital to a grinding halt. The industry is finally ready to spring back into life. SAG-AFTRA, the union representing more than 150,000 screen actors, has ended their strike as of 12:01 a.m. this morning. And Speaker Mike Johnson, the little-known Louisiana congressman who emerged from a hardliner revolt as House Republicans' new leader, is short on both time and experience to avert a U.S. government shutdown, which is expected to happen in a matter of days if an agreement cannot be reached. It's Avi Bernard in for Areva Martin for the moment. And this hour, we're going to be joined by Tracy K. Smith, the author of To Free the Captives, A Plea for the American Soul. It is a conversation that we have been very much looking forward to, and we will get right to it right after this break on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. We've got a lot to talk about.
Race, culture wars, political turf battles, criminal justice and injustice, the courts. These are the conversations you won't hear elsewhere. My guests are leading journalists, celebrities, and sports figures, elected leaders, and influencers. They aren't afraid to get into it and say the quiet part out loud. With Areva Martin in real time, your commute just became the most engaging part of your day. Tune in weekdays from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. or find us on YouTube. Areva Martin in real time, when you want it straight, no chaser.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the voice of reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the voice of reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head. Yeah.
We boldly go where no man has gone before.
Boldly taking talk radio where it has never gone before. New vistas, new voices, new views, new visions, new victories. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we're taking public media black.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcast of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Oh my God. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest spot.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
Bounce is back.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Are you interested in catching up on all the latest entertainment news, trending topics, and exciting interviews? I got you. Tune in to The Raw Report with Robin Ayers, Monday through Friday, 6 to 7 p.m. I'm your host, Robin Ayers. Join me every weekday with some of the best entertainment contributors in the business as we break down what's going on, who's got next, and what not to miss. Only on The Raw Report with Robin Ayers.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
There's a new sheriff in town.
All right, I'm Dr. Nicordelai Corte, and starting September 18th, I couldn't be more thrilled than invite you to join us for the launch of A More Perfect Union, weekdays right here on KBLA Talk 1580, weekdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific Time, that's 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. A More Perfect Union promises to deliver national news of consequence, informed opinion, and analysis beyond the headlines. As KBLA Talk 1580's chief national political analyst, every day you can expect your daily dose of political news of consequence. If you're looking to be engaged, enlightened, and empowered to be a part of the solution to issues related to national politics, elections, identity, culture change, and social justice, A More Perfect Union was designed for you. This daily political affairs show will feature notable journalists, industry leaders, lawmakers, change makers, tastemakers, and ordinary people motivated to do their part to reach beyond today's divisions, to make sense out of news of the day, and offer us all a chance to build a more perfect union. Come on.
We are back, and this is the second hour of Areva Martin in Real Time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. And in this hour, I'm super excited to be joined by the 22nd Poet Laureate of the United States, Pulitzer Prize-winning writer and professor of English and African American Studies at Harvard University, none other than Dr. Tracy K. Smith. And she's out with a new book called To Free the Captives, A Plea for the American Soul, Thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Smith. I am such a big fan and such an admirer of your work.
Oh, likewise. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just so honored.
Well, I just first say congratulations on your memoir. And I have so many questions for you about this book, because it's a memoir, but yet it's a book about racial tension, racial violence, racism, systemic racism, those things that we have been talking about for the last, we've been talking about them for decades, but they've been really in the news after the murder of George Floyd. So I just want to start by asking you, what was the catalyst for you to write To Free the Captives?
Well, yeah, you kind of take it right back to where this book became urgent for me. It was 2020. Like so many of us, I was living with a sense of grief, rage, and fear. I have young kids, and I was just thinking, gosh, how is it that we're back where it seems like we started in so many ways? And I wanted to find a way through language to move from those feelings that are sort of paralyzing into something that might be productive, clarifying, and maybe even healing in some way. And one thing that helped me do that was to say, okay, I descend from people who experienced versions of what we are watching and witnessing and experiencing ourselves. And they prevailed, they survived, they thrived, they founded, some official institutions and other unofficial institutions that helped one another be and become. And so listening and looking backward toward them helped ground me a little bit. And it helped me to begin to think about not just the history that we descend from, but the imagination, the collective imagination that we share in this country, because I think a lot begins in that site.
When we have these conversations about race, sometimes they are so painful. They can be contentious. Sometimes, people get downright belligerent. I've been, obviously, we've all been watching what's playing out in the news every day between Israel and Hamas. And I saw an article where a black woman, I'll call it a friend, a white woman who's Jewish, and they try to talk through the issues that are front and center, involving Israel and the Palestinian people in Gaza Strip, and they didn't get very far. And the black woman talked about, however, whenever she tries to have conversations about race, how they always end in this kind of impasse. So with that as the backdrop, what has been the response to your book? Because sometimes people don't want to confront or face the reality of racism in this country.
Yeah, it's a hard topic. And, there's a feeling of fear of doing or saying something wrong, feeling of anxiety about being perhaps implicated in racism, even if, you might believe yourself to be somebody who's against discrimination, against bigotry. And so beginning with fear is a hard place. It's hard to listen when you're afraid. It's hard to find the right words into difficulty when you're tense. One of the things that I am hearing, I guess, is a kind of gratitude or at least interest in some of the different registers that this book is trying to explore. So yes, history is a part of it. And there are places where I'm thinking in very direct language about our failures as a nation. But I'm also thinking about family. I'm thinking about the forms of love and care and the spirit practices that also maybe help eradicate some of the paralyzing fear that we bring with us into our most fraught topics. And so that's something. But what I really hope might be possible is that we can find our way into some of those hard conversations and also let go of a little bit of the stronghold that many of us have on memory. And this is what I mean. Several years ago, when I was in the Laureate ship, I visited a small town in Kentucky, mostly white town. And I read a number of poems that derive from letters that Black soldiers wrote to their family members and to the government during the Civil War. And it's a poem that's made up of all these archival voices, and they're very moving. They aren't tampered with by me. It's kind of just a curating of these voices that haven't necessarily made it onto our collective radar. So I read the poem, and after the reading, a woman came up to me who said, these letters and the point in history they take me back to really remind me of my own family and my grandmother who lived to be almost 100 years old. If you won't mind waiting, I want to rush home and bring something for you so that you can get a sense of who she was. So she was gone for a very long time. And finally she returned, and she had a different bearing about her. She seemed worried. She seemed almost apologetic. And I said, what happened? And she looked at me and she said, listen, my grandmother would never want to hurt you, but some of these songs and stories that she's reciting on this recording, and I just kind of knew exactly where she was going with that. I was thinking, okay, these old Kentucky songs that this woman had received from her parents and grandparents, and these are texts that are going to frame Black life in a way that's going to be hurtful. There was a part of me that was really disappointed, but another part of me said, no, this woman came back. And this woman, in the time it took for her to go home, maybe listen to these recordings again and return here, she realized something. She realized perhaps that the memories that she cleaves to might need to be modified a little bit. And that made me feel like maybe with courage or with a kind of tenderness toward others who are different from us, we can learn to let go of some of these pillars of memory and history, the very things that make it really hard sometimes for us to get into new territory or a new vocabulary for what we could do to live more productively with one another. So I'm really hopeful that we can be resourceful, and that maybe the poetry that makes up part of this book, or the thinking through different contexts, can be one road toward a different kind of willingness.
Wow, just so profound. And it's Avi Bernard back with you, Dr. Smith. Areva and I are going to have to tag team this interview as her internet is going in and out. But just what's some of the feedback that you're getting from your colleagues? Because I know that that this is work that is important to a lot of people. So what are you hearing from some of your colleagues?
Mm-hmm. Well, the book just came out on Tuesday, so it's fresh feedback. But one topic that we've been talking about and that's come up at some of the events is the emphasis in the book on the soul, the human soul, as a tool for thinking through our, political or our civic lives. And it's not necessarily a term that we turn to very much in the academy, but it's something that I'm trying to invite us to think about. In my upbringing as someone who descends from Black Southerners, my parents grew up during Jim Crow in Alabama, the vocabulary of belief was central to the sense of capacity, patience, diligence, and courage. And another thing too, which I would say is like belief in self, conviction that their lives matter and that there's something that they've been endowed with that is inviolable, no matter what the nation or even distant neighbors would say to contradict that. And so I'm thinking, okay, if we're willing to imagine that we're large eternal beings, maybe that allows us to think in two ways that are a little bit different. One is that the project of evolution and liberation that we're involved in is something that will span not only generations, but lifetimes. And maybe this is work that we can commit to over the long haul. I kind of believe that the ancestors that I turn to in terms of the research, but also some of the meditation that helped me to keep going in 2020 and that informed some of the trains of thought in this book, I believe they're allies in this work, even now in, out of bodily form. But the other thing that interests me about the soul is that it changes the terms of accountability or the scope of accountability that we live with. We're used to thinking, okay, what you do in your life, some people will think what you can get away with in your life is kind of the bottom line. But what might change in our sense of our responsibility if we can imagine a sense of accountability that extends even beyond the terms of an individual life. So these are different. It's a different vocabulary that I'm hoping we might be receptive to. Another term that feels like it might be useful to our sense of our neighbors in this nation is love, which isn't really necessarily something that we bring into our political discourse. But I wonder if we could activate a sense of how that too might be not only useful but necessary to unraveling this dense knot of resistance, of division, and again, of fear that we live with in this country.
Yeah, no, you said so much there. I mean, one politician who I can think of who does try to lead with love is Cory Booker. And when he ran for president, there seemed to be zero appetite for that kind of thing, which I think speaks to the environment that the country is in, especially when you zoom out even further and remember that Donald Trump was actually president, and he has a decent chance, if not a good chance, to be that again when he stands for and espouses nothing but hate. But you said something that I wanted to ask you about. You said thinking in terms, in greater terms than an individual life. And when you have this connection to your ancestors, and yet, as you said, it's so important, that belief in self is so important. And how do you think of this whole reparations conversation? Because belief in self is important, but some who believe that Black people are not entitled to reparations might say, yeah, your belief in self is all you need, and all you need to do is pull yourself up by your bootstraps. When you cannot ignore the history of this country and our individual ancestries and how our ancestors' paths have shaped our path. And so how do you look at this whole conversation on reparations in light of your research?
Well, I think that in order to be honest about what's possible in this country, we do have to recognize the effects of our nation's longstanding, rigid, and racially informed hierarchies. Those are, forms of worth and that have determined nearly everything in this country. Who has the rights to citizenship, who has, access to the ballot, whose needs, wishes, and demands are going to take priority. And so I feel like taking a look at what freedom is rooted in this country is essential. And in my perspective, it points to the notion that we can't just start from where we are now. We have to go back and correct the inequities and the unjust ranking that we've been subject to for centuries. And I think a vocabulary of reparations is something that can really help that. One of the things that was surprising but important for me to write my way into was a sense of what we take freedom to be. And one of the things that I realized is in this country, we've been trained to think of some people as free, as innately free. And they are the ones who appear to descend from histories of power, of ownership, and frankly, of dominion over other people. And the myth or the misconception about this is that it's something that has to do with their worth. It's something that's inseparable from their very persons, when it's been won or stolen or claimed through campaigns of violence and enslavement and colonization. But the flip side of that coin is that others of us are not necessarily free, but rather freed. And that's because we are seen to descend from histories of violence. We are seen to have been primarily acted upon by the people whose freedom has gone uncontested. And so that's not really a fair or level playing field. And in my mind, that's another reason why the conversation around reparations needs to be entered into in earnest and with a sense of willingness to change our sense of what the freedom we've long kind of insisted exists, to think about how far that actually has gone.
Yeah, really well said. When we come forward, I wanna ask you about your personal feelings regarding looking into your family's history. I know that there's a lot of interest in a lot of us in our ancestry and looking back, and there's all these ancestry.coms and all these things, and 23andMe, and just these things, casual things that we can do. But you went so deep, and I want to get your perspective on what it was like for you. Was it painful? What was it? I want to know what you felt as you were digging through all this personal family history for you. And we'll do that right after this news, traffic, and sports update on KBLA Talk 1580.
I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the voice of reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Boldly taking talk radio where it has never gone before. New vistas, new voices, new views, new visions, new victories. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we're taking public media black.
Follow the leader. KBLA Talk 1580. Follow the leader.
If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcast of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Follow the leader. Oh my God. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest bar, shot with a rest bar, shot with a rest bar.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
Bounce is back.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Are you interested in catching up on all the latest entertainment news, trending topics, and exciting interviews? I got you. Tune in to The Raw Report with Robin Ayers, Monday through Friday, 6 to 7 p.m. I'm your host, Robin Ayers. Join me every weekday with some of the best entertainment contributors in the business as we break down what's going on, who's got next, and what not to miss. Only on The Raw Report with Robin Ayers.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
There's a new sheriff in town.
All right, I'm Dr. Nicordelai Corte, and starting September 18th, I couldn't be more thrilled than invite you to join us for the launch of A More Perfect Union. Weekdays right here on KBLA Talk 1580. Weekdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific Time. That's 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. A More Perfect Union promises to deliver national news of consequence, informed opinion, and analysis beyond the headlines. As KBLA Talk 1580's chief national political analyst, every day you can expect your daily dose of political news of consequence. If you're looking to be engaged, enlightened, and empowered to be a part of the solution to issues related to national politics, elections, identity, culture change, and social justice, A More Perfect Union was designed for you. This daily political affairs show will feature notable journalists, industry leaders, lawmakers, change makers, tastemakers, and ordinary people motivated to do their part to reach beyond today's divisions, to make sense out of news of the day, and offer us all a chance to build a more perfect union. Come on and join me.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like the style, though?
We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. We've got a lot to talk about.
Race, culture wars, political.
And we're back on Areva Martin in real time. Avi Bernard stepping in for Areva today. And I am so grateful to be joined by Dr. Tracy K. Smith, author of To Free the Captives, A Plea for the American Soul, and also Poet Laureate, 22nd Poet Laureate of the United States. Dr. Smith, so grateful to have you here. Before the break, I was asking you about what the experience was like for you in digging so deeply into your family's past. I mean, we all know that as Black Americans, our ancestors' lives were probably very painful, and it's sad to even think about things like that sometimes. But when you dig back the way you did and see all the specifics of so many of your ancestors, just what are some of the emotions you went through?
Well, I relate to that feeling of like the worry of the burden of history and the pain that we know is there. When I was younger, I often found myself shying away from conversations with my parents and their siblings about the past, because I was afraid we would get to a place where I would learn that they'd suffered, and I didn't want to know that. I didn't want to feel or hear that. And I realized that was a tremendous loss that resulted from just wanting to shy away from the weight of history. So I wanted to turn toward the archive as I could and glean as much as I could. And yes, there's evidence of, challenges and difficulty and injustice, but there's also a beautiful story of community, of love, and of what I think of as a really resourceful improvisation by which family members and kin created the network and the sense of support and possibility that many of America's institutions failed to create for them or sustain for them. And so there was a real feeling of joy that I found in looking through census records and seeing how families perhaps moved, but sometimes moved into communities where other kin were living and formed, as I can imagine, a network of support. There's a moment in the Depression where somebody who was close with my grandmother's side of the family wrote a letter to the governor of Alabama saying, all the Black folks in my community have been laid off and we haven't been given an explanation, and food prices are going higher, and we need your help. Could you please offer some help? And he got a letter back from the governor's representative, which essentially didn't offer any help. It was kind of like a little bit of vague bureaucratic language that just sort of pushed the buck a little bit. But in the next census that I found, that person and his wife had moved into the household of their daughter and her husband and their children. And he had gone from, having a farm to working in a nursery in a city. And I realized, those are choices that were necessary because there wasn't, support coming from the state or from other institutions. But family is an institution, and the love and care that family is made up of is also a kind of support, and that heartened me to realize that there's a patchwork of kin and care that runs through the archive, and we just have to be willing to listen for it and to read it almost between the lines. But it was also really wonderful to find evidence of people's lives. I found, draft cards of my grandfather and great uncle as they served in World War I. I didn't know very much about their experience, and there aren't letters that I could find, but there are archival materials of some other Black servicemen from that same time period. And I feel like their experience told me a little bit about what, my own family members must have experienced. And it made me feel like the family I belong to extends beyond bloodlines. And it has to do with people in a place and a time who were experiencing similar circumstances, similar pressures, and who managed in similar ways, by making do, by reaching out, by strengthening bonds within and across family and community. I think that's one of the hallmarks of Black life in this country, that we know how to love, and we know how to lend a hand. We also know how to forgive. And I think those are some of the forms of grace that have sustained us. They're some of the capacities that give me a real sense of confidence that even with the outrage that we live with in so many contexts, even with the sense that not everybody is willing to enter into conversations that might lead us to change the ways that we live with one another and change our understanding of the complexity of race and racism in this country. I feel hopeful that there is a sense of faith in what can be built, and much of what was built continues to endure. I think that, I, and maybe you would feel this way too, were evidence of that. Families made sacrifices and choices so that subsequent generations could go a little bit farther. So rather than feeling saddled with sorrow, I feel a sense of gratitude.
That's just really beautifully put. I mean, how you said that you found evidence of their existence. I really love that. And I think it is worth it to look into our ancestry just to have that, even if you are going to encounter some pain and some uncomfortable feelings. I do think it's worth it. And, as you were talking and speaking about finding evidence of your ancestors having existed, my wife is really into her ancestors, and she has an altar, and she brings them food, and so I was just wondering, do you have any kind of ongoing communication with your ancestors?
Well, this book really helped me to forge what feels like a direct line of communication. 2020 was the year when I realized I needed to do more than I had been doing in the past to feel grounded and feel whole of mind and spirit. All the stress and the pressure in the world and in different interpersonal dynamics during that time were pretty overwhelming. And so I started meditating, and the form of meditation that I found my way to was not just like silence and clearing the mind, which is what I always thought meditation was, but it became a kind of dialogue or conversation with others who I perceived to be ancestors and guides. And a lot of the book bears witness to this practice. And, part of it is, my feelings of insecurity initially, because I was worried, maybe I'm making this up. Maybe this isn't really happening. But the kinds of insights and the forms of encouragement that came to me when I would go inward and when I would ask to be spoken to, guided, instructed in some way, it was undeniable how useful those offerings were. And so, absolutely, I feel like our ancestors are not gone. Their investment in the work of liberation and the safety and the flourishing of us, their descendants, isn't over. I believe that there is a form of communication that it exists across what we think of as of life and death, or the mortal divide. And it's something that is meant to help us, meant to be sustaining. I come away with this notion that we're working side by side with them toward the kinds of transformation that we know is necessary. And that feels really good.
No, I think that I'm sure my wife would agree with you. And she talks about her spirit guides a lot, and she consults them with some of the biggest decisions that she faces, and she always does. Yeah. She gets answers when she does ask them for guidance, and so I don't doubt what you're saying at all. And I'm not as good at that practice, but I do believe that it's a real thing, and it sounds like it's some much needed help when you have big decisions to make, or things you're unsure about in your life or your career, relationships, or anything. And you mentioned 2020 was a tough year, and I know you're not alone in that, because we all experienced the pandemic. 2020 is when the pandemic hit, and it was also when George Floyd was murdered, and a lot of those feelings came up. And so when we come forward, I want to ask you if you think the United States has made any significant and or sustainable progress since George Floyd's murder and the movement that followed. And I want to ask you about that right when we come forward, right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
All the latest entertainment news, trending topics, and exciting interviews, I got you. Tune in to The Raw Report with Robin Ayers, Monday through Friday, 6 to 7 p.m. I'm your host, Robin Ayers. Join me every weekday with some of the best entertainment contributors in the business as we break down what's going on, who's got next, and what not to miss. Only on The Raw Report with Robin Ayers.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
There's a new sheriff in town.
All right, I'm Dr. Nicordelai Corte, and starting September 18th, I couldn't be more thrilled than invite you to join us for the launch of A More Perfect Union. Weekdays right here on KBLA Talk 1580. Weekdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific Time. That's 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. A More Perfect Union promises to deliver national news of consequence, informed opinion, and analysis beyond the headlines. As KBLA Talk 1580's chief national political analyst, every day you can expect your daily dose of political news of consequence. If you're looking to be engaged, enlightened, and empowered to be a part of the solution to issues related to national politics, elections, identity, culture change, and social justice, A More Perfect Union was designed for you. This daily political affairs show will feature notable journalists, industry leaders, lawmakers, change makers, tastemakers, and ordinary people motivated to do their part to reach beyond today's divisions, to make sense out of news of the day, and offer us all a chance to build a more perfect union. Come on and join me.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like your style, though.
We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. We've got a lot to talk about.
Race, culture wars, political turf battles, criminal justice.
And we're back on Areva Martin in real time. Avi Bernard stepping in for Areva Martin tonight. And we are so lucky to be joined by Dr. Tracy K. Smith, author of To Free the Captives, A Plea for the American Soul. And Dr. Smith, I want to ask you if you'll be able to read an excerpt from that book. But first, I wanted to get back to what we were talking about before the break. I mentioned that I wanted to ask you about the year 2020 because you mentioned that as being a particularly difficult year. And we all remember 2020, even though I know that that year and maybe 2021 and just that whole time maybe felt like a blur, maybe an angry, depressing blur for a lot of us with the pandemic and with the murder of George Floyd. But with that movement that followed, I know we saw a lot of, I don't want to say fake, but I don't know, just not genuine support. Maybe, people were putting black squares up on their Instagram and, things that really didn't matter that much. And it was nice to feel, at least to me, it was nice to feel like people were finally starting to hear us. I don't know, however, though, that it was sustained or that anything has really changed since then. But I definitely want to get your thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it was definitely a moment where we began to realize that some of the forms of redress that we had sort of been taught to trust were not the only things that were going to save us, if you will. And one thing that makes me feel like we are evolving has to do with the students that I work with. I'm a professor. I work with, a generation of young people who are finding their way to what they are passionate about, and also forging new vocabularies for talking about themselves, their needs, and also for naming what questions of conscience they're willing to work toward or work for. And that makes me very excited. This is a, generation that's willing to say it's no longer acceptable to us to endure the things that our parents had just learned to sort of just suck up and deal with. So this is a generation that's really talking not only about the harm of something like, let's say, microaggressions, but also drawing their elders, their teachers and administrators into conversations about how to change as a community. I think institutions, to the extent that they're able to change, and we know institutional change is slow, they're motivated and challenged by young people who understand that the world is not living up to the promises or the promise that it holds. That makes me feel hopeful, but I agree there's a lot of work ahead. Part of realization for me had to do with the sense that institutions that we've put so much faith in are just as vulnerable as we individuals are. 2020 was a time when, arts industries suffered because of the, shutdowns and quarantine. Universities had to re-strategize how to deliver coursework to students who could no longer be on campus. But I think that there are some lessons that have been learned and some steps that feel durable in a way. And that gives me some hope. But it also makes me think, okay, let's continue to build. Let's not wait for the next crisis to take those next steps.
Yeah, and I do think that you have to have an air of optimism as a Black person. And, James Baldwin said something along the lines of to be a Black man in America and to have any kind of consciousness at all is to be in a rage all the time. I don't think I have that quote exactly right, but it's something along those lines. And I do think that while I understand that, and that's certainly justified, I think that we do have to look at the progress and keep our mind focused on more progress. And the more we focus on, I do believe the more that we can continue to make progress, however slow it is, and however slow it certainly feels at times, if not all the time.
Yeah. Baldwin talked a lot about love as well.
Yeah.
And some of the quotes that helped me during that time when I was feeling rage or fear were his reminders that the work we're doing is rooted in love. I mean, he says that to his young nephew, you have to remember that the people you might think of as your enemies are your younger brothers, your misguided younger brothers. And part of our work is to offer the care by which realization might be made possible. I try and think about that as well, and think about the ways that what we really are doing is trying to save ourselves, by which I mean all of us. The people who might believe themselves to be the most free in our, national enterprise are actually equally captive in a system that has convinced us that we need to be fighting with one another over something as abstract as freedom, and that freedom is something that must be hoarded, when I think it might more productively be envisioned as something that we can make grow by sharing and passing on.
Before we run out of time, Dr. Smith, I want to see if we can get you to read an excerpt from your book. We have about 2 minutes left, 2.5 minutes. So if you can read us an excerpt, that would be
sure. I'll read you a brief bit at the end of a chapter called Scenes from a Marriage, or What is the American Imagination? Because I think in some ways that's my subject, this collective imaginative space that informs what we want and how we see ourselves and others.
Okay, great.
I want to say this, all of this is a story about the American imagination, which envisions itself as a place where all are welcome a chill white space peopled with minds, bodies, distinct energies. But plunge beneath the surface, which is bright with reflected light, and you'll find there are hierarchies running fathoms deep. In one, you are an obstacle to be cleared, or a means of momentary leverage, or a gauge against which the worthy might measure their privilege. I bob, you drift. We spend ourselves to stay just where we are, near the surface or at some dim depth. Our legs, kicking to keep us afloat, stir up all manner of matter. We can drift out far. We can rise up to sip air. We can come to believe it is a matter of buoyancy, our settling back eventually at the rung of the familiar, or sifting up ever higher above legions of others. The sea of us is everywhere. We cover the earth with our surge and our pitch. We cannot see to the bottom, nor past the downward rim of far-off horizon. And we are, all of us, in America, beneath America, full with America, famished for what America has promised. I, we, they, you, all are treading the same water. I do not want to pull you or be pulled by you under. Is there a shore, do you wonder, where we can rest, do you reckon?
And that's why you're the 22nd Poet Laureate of the United States. Just beautiful. I myself will absolutely be buying a copy of your book for both myself and my wife. And we really appreciate your time today. Where can we find the book?
Oh, I hope you can find it just about everywhere. And I hope that you might go to your local independent bookstore and support the work in the community building that they do.
That sounds like a plan to me. Dr. Tracy K. Smith, author of To Free the Captives, A Plea for the American Soul. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Be well.
You too. The Raw Report with Robin Ayers is coming up next. I'm Avi Bernard, and I am gone.
By checking out the podcast of your favorite shows at your leisure at KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Follow the leader when the leader. Oh my God. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest spot. Shot with a rest spot. Shot with a rest spot.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store.